Ramona hadn't planned on hearing any of it. Saturday mornings at the Hamilton Farmers Market were the 1 hour of the week that belonged only to her, and that January morning she was buried under a wool toque and a scarf wound twice around her face, the way half the city dressed when the wind came off the harbor. She looked like anybody. That was the point. Since the wedding, she'd gone straight from the office to the house and back again, and hardly a soul in the neighborhood could have picked her out of a crowd. So when she stopped near the root vegetable stall to squeeze a bag of yellow onions and heard her own name float over the bins, nobody thought to lower their voice. "You know Glenda's daughter-in-law?" one woman said. She had a granny cart and a good coat and the comfortable tone of someone who'd told the story before. "The one Weston married after all that fuss?" another answered. "The lazy one? Lazy doesn't cover it. Glenda says she doesn't put $1 toward the house. Comes home, parks herself on the Chesterfield, and lets that poor woman do every last thing. Cooking, cleaning, the whole works." A third voice, delighted and picky. "Won't eat what's made for her. No wonder Glenda didn't want the boy marrying some girl from up in cottage country." They laughed the easy laugh of women who felt safe. Ramona stood very still with a bag of onions in her mitt and felt the heat crawl up her neck under the scarf. First she was surprised, then she was hurt, in that quick-winded way, like a door swinging into you. Then, standing between the beets and the parsnips with steam coming off the coffee urn behind her, she got angry. Not loud angry. The other kind, the kind that goes quiet and starts making a list. By the time she reached the parking lot, she'd already decided. Glenda was going to learn that Ramona, instead of being someone you could push around, was someone who kept receipts. She wasn't sure yet how. She only knew she wasn't going to spend another year swallowing it. To understand why Ramona was carrying groceries into Glenda's house at all, you have to go back a couple of years, to the version of things before the wedding, when the whole street used to slow down to listen at the arguments coming out of that place. Weston and his mother had been going at it for months by then. At first, the neighbors would linger by the fence and trade looks. Eventually nobody bothered because it was always the same fight, word for word. Glenda would not accept her son's girlfriend. He'd brought Ramona around one Sunday to introduce her. The woman he loved, the woman he wanted to marry. And Glenda had taken one look and made up her mind. Too sharp. Too sure of herself. Not soft enough, not deferential enough, nothing like the quiet daughter-in-law. Glenda had pictured pouring her tea for the rest of her life. "I don't get what's going on in your head anymore," Weston said one evening, dropping into a kitchen chair and pressing his hands to his temples. "This is my life. Why do you have to run it?" "Because I love you." Glenda folded her arms. "A girl like that will have you by the collar inside a year." Weston had explained it 100 times and he explained it again, wearily. "People are just different, Mom. She's confident. Since when is that a crime? And you're one to talk. You've had Dad on a leash for 30 years. Glenda's mouth went tight. Before she could fire back, Dale wandered in from the front room, took one look at the two of them, and sighed the sigh of a man who'd heard this on a loop. "Do the pair of you ever get tired of the same argument every single day? You don't see it?" Glenda rounded on him. "Your son's making the mistake of his life." "And what mistake is that?" "He's picked the wrong woman." Dale shook his head slowly. "How's she wrong? She's got a degree, she works, she comes from decent people. Maybe stop picking apart somebody else's daughter and take a hard look at your own son first." Glenda didn't have an answer for that, but she never backed down out of principle. "I don't care what either of you says. I'm not accepting it." Weston was tired to the bone. What his mother couldn't see, what she wouldn't let herself see, was that Ramona's spine was the whole reason he'd fallen for her. 3 years, since they'd met working the same floor at a logistics firm. In all that time, she'd never once leaned on him for money, never once played helpless to get something. If anything, it made him admire her more. Behind the blunt talk was a woman who was gentle where it counted, who remembered his mother's birthday when he forgot, who never let a friend go without. Ramona herself never seemed rattled by any of it, which drove Glenda crazier than anything. Whenever Weston came home wound up, it was Ramona who talked him down. "Why are you carrying it around like this?" she'd say, half smiling. "Give your mom time. She'll come around. And if she doesn't, then I wait. However long it takes." It was Marlon, Weston's best friend since Mohawk College, who finally broke the deadlock, though it was really his sister's doing. Marlon's younger sister, Jolene, had spent most of her life out in Vancouver and had just moved back east. And one afternoon the four of them ended up at a cafe on James Street North after everyone else had cleared out. Jolene had that West Coast ease, said whatever she thought, laughed at things other people took too seriously. "So?" she asked, once Marlon had filled her in on the whole saga. "That's it? I thought this was going to be something actually hard. The others traded looks. It didn't feel simple to them. Jolene leaned back and stirred her coffee. Parents are strange animals. If asking nicely won't move them, sometimes you've got to make them see the alternative. She pulled her chair in and dropped her voice. And the longer she talked, the wider the grins around the little table got. That week, Weston sat down to dinner with his parents and casually mentioned that he'd been thinking things over. Maybe his mother had a point about Ramona. Glenda's head came up like a dog hearing the treat bag. Really? I've actually been seeing someone else for a bit, he said, not looking up from his plate. I'll bring her round soon. Glenda lit up like the CN Tower. She couldn't help herself. Now that's what I've been waiting to hear. If you'd listened to me from the start, we'd have saved a year of grief. This one checks every box you've ever named, Weston went on. City girl, money in the family, lived out west for years. Exactly the sort you always wanted. See, that's what I'm talking about. So, since I did it your way, Weston said, and here his voice went careful, I'd appreciate it if you stayed out of my personal life from here on. Glenda was in far too good a mood to notice the trap. Fine. If you've picked right, I've got nothing to say. Just bring her here. A few days later he did. The woman on his arm was Jolene, and Jolene had gone all in. Her hair was dyed a loud copper. Her makeup was a full inch thick, and she swept into the house without so much as a hello, grabbed a butter tart off the plate Glenda had set out, and started eating before she'd even sat down. Don't mind me, she said around a mouthful. Lived out west so long I've forgotten how you're all so formal back here. She kept going. My dad runs 3 dealerships, by the way. When Weston and I get married, he's moving in with my family. I'm not budging. If he can handle the business, we'll probably bring him out to Vancouver with us. Glenda's smile was welded on. Isn't it a little early to be talking marriage? Not really, Jolene said breezily. Oh, before the wedding, Daddy expects a decent contribution from the groom's side. Just so you know. Her phone rang. She put it on speaker on purpose, let her friends' voices fill the kitchen begging her to come out drinking, and told them she'd be right there. Then she stood, tugged Weston's sleeve, and asked, wasn't that the same crowd's out from last weekend, the one with the guy who'd just gotten out? And Weston, playing along beautifully, asked which guy, and Jolene laughed and said, oh, he's out now. Come on. By the time Glenda hustled the girl into a cab and marched back inside, she was shaking. What in God's name was that? You wanted city, Weston said, shrugging. You wanted money, looks, the whole package. She's got all of it. What's the problem? The problem is her, that mouth, those people. You told me you wouldn't interfere if I picked someone who met your standards. So don't. I'm done with Ramona. I'm marrying Jolene. He walked out before she could finish. That night he didn't come home. He stayed at Ramona's and let his mother's calls ring out until well past midnight, when he finally picked up just to say, yes, he was with Jolene, and hung up on her again. The next few days he played it perfectly. When Glenda pushed, he pushed back harder. Even brought home a printed job posting for a 2-year contract in Calgary and laid the paperwork on the table. Said he'd rather leave and start fresh somewhere his family couldn't run his life. Dale went pale. Glenda's voice cracked for the first time. You're our only son. You'd be gone for years. And then, almost gently, let's not rush into anything. One step at a time. Ramona had told him exactly how it would land, and it landed. The thought of her boy vanishing to Alberta with that copper-haired disaster kept Glenda up for a week. So when Ramona turned up at the door one morning looking for Weston's, Glenda, who a month earlier could barely say hello, practically pulled her inside. He's upstairs. Go get him, would you? He's been hiding in that room for days. Ramona came back down with Weston just as a voice hollered from the front step. It was Jolene, storming in for the grand finale, demanding to know why Weston wasn't returning her calls, spotting Ramona, and delivering her lines with real relish. Who's she? So you had a girlfriend the whole time. You were playing me. Until Glenda, cornered and horrified, stepped between them and announced that the family had already settled on marriage with Ramona, thank you, and that whatever Jolene thought was going on could stay a friendship. Jolene flounced out in a beautiful fury, and the second the door shut, Weston turned to his mother with a grin. So, accepting Ramona now, are we? You, Glenda said, are nothing but trouble. And she stalked off, but she'd said it. Next to Jolene, Ramona had suddenly become the daughter-in-law she could live with. And that afternoon the whole crew met back on James Street, and Marlon nearly cried laughing. And Jolene raised her mug and said she'd better be getting a wedding invite. And everyone toasted the con. For what it's worth, Jolene told Ramona before they left, more serious now, I don't think she really accepts it. Not all the way down. Think hard before you marry into that. Ramona only smiled. As long as she signs off, that's enough. I'm not exactly easy to steamroll. The wedding wasn't lavish, but Ramona made sure it was respectable, and it was there she got her first proper look at what she was in for. Trouble had started before the vows. Over lunch one afternoon, with the date already set, Glenda had gotten curious. "I've been wondering," she said, all innocence, ladling out soup, "how they handle weddings where you're from. Though I suppose up in a little cottage town people don't spend much on that sort of thing." The first half was harmless. The second half was a knife. Weston went red. "Not now." Dale looked pained. "Just eat, would you?" "I was talking to Ramona," Glenda snapped. "Not either of you. She's practically family. What's wrong with asking?" Ramona set down her spoon, perfectly calm. "It's fine, Dale." She turned to her mother-in-law. "Honestly, I think it's best to follow your customs here. No need to worry about how we do it back home." Glenda opened her mouth, plainly delighted at the thought of not spending a nickel, and Ramona kept going, mild as milk. "Money can always be earned again. What matters is the family's reputation. Imagine folks in Hamilton hearing the family threw a wedding and hardly put in a cent. They'd talk about it for years." Glenda shut her mouth. It had landed exactly where it hurt. Glenda cared about appearances more than air. After Ramona went home, Glenda exploded. "You see the woman you've picked? We're not even married yet, and she argues with everything." Dale finally lost it. "Be reasonable. You've got a daughter too. How'd you feel if some future in-laws of Kendra's went hunting for ways to cheap out on her wedding? The way you think comes out in the way you talk. It's a mercy you said that to Ramona and not to her parents." Glenda had nothing. A week later, the family drove up to Bracebridge to meet Ramona's people. And the whole way Glenda pictured a run-down farmhouse in mud. What she found instead was a big, bright, modern house on a lot most people in the city would sell a kidney for. Muskoka, it turned out, where the small-town cottage folk had money the city people only dreamed about. Ramona's father, Gordon, and her mother, Yvette, laid out a spread and welcomed everyone like family. When the wedding came up, Gordon smiled and said his family had spent their lives running the marina and the hardware store, so they didn't have much to offer. And Glenda, secretly relieved, thought there it is. And then Gordon finished the sentence. "We'd like to give the kids some money to get started, and if they ever want to buy a place or open something of their own, we'll help however we can." Glenda froze with her fork in the air. On the drive home, Dale didn't even try to hide his satisfaction. "See? This is what I mean about you and your assumptions. Good thing she took your little wedding remark politely, or it'd have been you sitting there embarrassed." For once, Glenda had no comeback. So the wedding was decent in the end, because Glenda no longer dared cut corners. It was there Ramona first met her sister-in-law, Kendra, 23, fresh out of a college program, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, who threw sideways glances at Ramona all through the reception. It took Ramona a while to learn why. Glenda had spent months feeding Kendra stories, and Kendra had made up her mind about her brother's wife long before they'd exchanged a word. That night, after the last guest left, Ramona carried a shoebox full of gift envelopes up to Glenda's room and knocked. "This is everything, Weston, and I got to do," she said, holding it out. "Use it for the wedding costs." Glenda, who'd been cool as a cucumber a moment before, took the box and for the first time, felt a small unwelcome flush of something like shame. "Thank you," she managed. It wasn't enough to change her mind about the girl, but she took the box. Now the obvious question, the one everybody asks. Why on earth were two people with good jobs living under Glenda's roof at all? Ramona had asked Weston the same thing before they married. The answer was the answer half of Southern Ontario would give you, the down payment. In Hamilton, the prices had gone berserk, and every month the two of them stayed put was another few thousand into the account that would one day get them out. There was more to it, too. Dale had had a heart scare the winter before, a stent and a fright, and Glenda, who'd never say it plainly, leaned on that hard. Family looks after family. You don't leave your father's when he's just off the table. So they'd made a deal between themselves. 2 years under the roof, heads down, savings up, and then their own front door. Ramona could stomach almost anything for 2 years. She'd told Weston as much. She just hadn't counted on the farmer's market. Because that was the morning it curdled. She came home from the market with her onions and her quiet list, and she thought it over all day. And she knew Glenda well enough to know that a direct accusation would go nowhere. Glenda would deny it flat, then twist it into Ramona being oversensitive. Every single day Ramona cooked, cleaned, handed over money for groceries, covered the hydro bill, picked up Dale's and Glenda's prescriptions at the shoppers on the corner. And that was the woman being described at the market as a freeloader who wouldn't lift a finger. The more she turned it over, the calmer and clearer she got. By the time she lay down for an afternoon nap, she had a plan, and she slept better than she had in weeks. That Sunday she made a point of getting up late. She puttered in the yard. She did not so much as glance at the kitchen. Glenda watched, saying nothing, already storing it up as ammunition. As the afternoon wore on and no dinner appeared, Glenda came looking and found her daughter-in-law stretched out on the Chesterfield laughing at something on her phone. Glenda was winding up to let her have it when the doorbell rang. Ramona got there first. A moment later, Glenda watched her lead and Mrs. Okafor from 2 doors down, all smiles. "Hello, Glenda," the neighbor said warmly. "Ramona invited me for supper. I thought maybe you were celebrating something." Glenda's face did a complicated thing. Before she could speak, Ramona jumped in. "Nothing special. We've been neighbors for years. I just thought it'd be nice to share a meal." With the invitation already made, refusing would only embarrass everyone, so Glenda poured Mrs. Okafor a glass of water and turned to Ramona. "Go start supper then. We can't have someone over and not feed them." Ramona looked genuinely puzzled. "Why would I cook? What do you mean, why?" "Well," Ramona said pleasantly, "you've been telling the whole street that I lie around all day watching TV while you do everything in this house. I figured tonight I'd let you show Mrs. Okafor how it's done." At that exact moment, Weston and Dale came in from their walk, stamping snow off their boots. Mrs. Okafor's eyebrows had climbed halfway up her forehead. Glenda swallowed something the size of a golf ball and went into the kitchen. Here was the thing Ramona was counting on. Since Ramona had married in, Glenda had barely cooked. Now, alone at the stove with a guest waiting, she struggled through every step, and because she rushed, nothing came out right. Dale sat down mortified. They never had company, and this was not the meal he'd have chosen to serve. He turned to Ramona. "Why'd you let it get this far, with people over?" "I didn't cook any of it," Ramona said evenly. "Glenda did." Weston, catching on, tried to smooth it. "Ramona, even if you didn't help, you don't have to put it like that." She didn't blink. "Glenda's been telling everyone I never do a thing around here, that I don't put in $1, that she carries the whole house. If I kept doing all the work, wouldn't that make her a liar in front of Mrs. Okafor? I'd hate to embarrass her." The color drained out of Glenda's face. She caught the look in Dale's eye and knew better than to open her mouth. Mrs. Okafor was already putting it together, and the way she looked at Glenda had changed entirely, but she picked up her fork and, out of politeness, tried the chicken. Her eyes went wide. It was salt on salt, inedible. Ramona nearly lost it and had to look at her plate. Dale sank lower in his chair. In 30 years, Glenda had never once produced a dinner that didn't have something wrong with it. Soup like brine, rice like gravel, and any time they'd had guests he'd quietly ordered in rather than risk it. The only reason mealtimes had improved lately was Ramona, who could actually cook. Mrs. Okafor forced down 3 bites, thanked them, and left early. The food was bad, and the air was worse. The door had barely clicked when Dale rounded on his wife. "What exactly have you been telling people about her?" "I didn't say anything. Why are you taking her word?" Ramona set her phone on the table and pressed play. The market filled the room, the granny cart, the comfortable voices. "Doesn't put $1 toward the house. Lets that poor woman do everything." Every word crisp. Dale's face went to stone. Glenda sat frozen. "What are you doing, Glenda?" Dale said quietly. "You want to blow up this whole family before you're satisfied?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came. The evidence was right there on the maple table. Ramona finally spoke, and she wasn't unkind about it. "If there's something you don't like about me, say it to my face. But telling people things that aren't true, that's not on." She let that sit, then went softer. "The way I see it, if I keep doing everything I've always done, sooner or later people work out that the story doesn't match, and then you're the one who looks bad. So maybe from now on, I'll be the lazy daughter-in-law you've been describing. I don't mind. It gives you a chance to be the hardworking mother-in-law you've told everybody you are." Glenda understood then that she'd been outplayed from the jump. Anything she said now would only dig deeper. Her voice went small. "I don't dislike you. I only wanted you to be better." Dale cut her off. "Enough excuses. You've got too much time on your hands, that's the trouble. From now on you spend it helping in this house instead of running your mouth about it up and down the street." Then to Ramona, "You keep doing the cooking. I can't eat hers." Glenda shot Ramona a glare on her way to bed, and Ramona just stood there with a small, calm smile. Weston, who'd figured out the whole thing 3 moves back, decided the wisest place for him was out of it. Though the more he thought about his unshakable mother finally being put on the back foot, the harder it was not to laugh. Word travels on a street where the houses share a driveway. Mrs. Okafor had heard the whole argument through the wall, and within a week the neighbors had switched from talking about the lazy daughter-in-law to talking about Glenda. Embarrassed, Glenda started staying inside, and the gossip circle lost its ringleader. And then, just as the house was settling, Kendra came home for good. She'd finished her program with a certificate, she didn't much care about, and no job, because she'd spent 3 years treating school like an inconvenience. And now she was back in her old room being what Ramona privately came to think of as a full-time house guest. 23, an adult by any count. And she hadn't washed a dish since she'd arrived. She scrolled her phone, met her friends, and found a reason to be somewhere else whenever there was work to do. Worse, she'd order Ramona around while she did it. Make me a plate. Is supper ready? With a princess's easy assumption that of course someone else would handle it. The money for Kendra's coffees and clothes came, in the end, out of what Ramona and Weston put into the household, though Ramona never made a thing of it. Once money left her hand for the house, she stopped thinking of it as hers. One evening after supper, Kendra pushed back from the table and on her way to the couch tossed over her shoulder, "Cut me up some fruit later, would you?" Ramona would normally have let it slide. "Not tonight." "Kendra, hang on." Kendra turned surprised. Nobody talked to her like that. "You're the youngest in this house," Ramona said. "You're a grown woman. You don't have a job and you're home all day. Don't you think it's time you gave your mom a hand? I've never once seen you do a thing since you got back." "I've never had to do any of that." Kendra shot back. "Who do you think you are, telling me what to do?" Weston, feeling it go sideways, tried to catch it. "Come on, Kend. She's right. It's not much. I've seen you have her fetching things for you all week." Kendra crossed her arms. "She's the daughter-in-law. That's the job." Ramona stood up. "If that's how you see it, then starting tomorrow you go get a job and bring money into this house, and I'll stay home and do every chore. Sound fair?" Kendra had no answer. Glenda leapt in to shield her. "That's enough. I'll do myself." And Ramona turned to her, quiet. "You shouldn't keep covering for her. One day she'll marry into some family that isn't half as patient as I've been." Glenda knew exactly what that meant, but with Dale sitting right there, she couldn't say a word. And Dale, who'd been watching the whole thing, finally spoke. "Starting tomorrow, Kendra, you help your mother. You're a grown woman. You don't get to drift around here with no responsibilities." Once Dale decided a thing, it was decided. Kendra agreed, seething. The resentment only grew after that because Dale kept comparing them out loud. Loud enough to carry into the kitchen where Kendra was banging dishes. "Look at Ramona. Works, keeps the house respectful. Maybe pay a little more attention to your own daughter and a little less to picking apart mine." A few weeks on, Kendra still couldn't land a job. Her marks had been middling, and she turned her nose up at anything that didn't pay enough or asked too much. Then one supper, out of what looked like generosity, Ramona said, "Still looking, Kendra? My company's got an opening. I could put your name in. How much does it pay? What hours?" Kendra said instantly, "If it's low, I'm not interested." Ramona shrugged. "I only asked if you wanted help. Hold out for better if you like." Dale weighed in. "What are you being fussy about? If your sister-in-law can do it, so can you." Glenda, of all people, sealed it. "Just take it for now. She's been there years. With your certificate, you'll be into management in no time." Ramona smiled at her plate. The second Kendra said yes, Ramona knew exactly what she was going to do. The next morning, she carried Kendra's resume straight to HR. "Book her an interview today," she said. "Junior operations clerk. And on her way out, one more thing. Don't let anyone know she's related to me. And don't tell her what I do here." Because here was the piece nobody in that house had bothered to find out. Before the wedding, whenever Glenda sneered about the small-town girl with the little office job, Ramona had let her believe it. She wasn't a clerk. She was the operations manager for the whole regional division, 3 floors up, corner office. She'd never lied. She'd just never corrected anyone. It had seemed easier, and now it was useful. Kendra got the job and wasn't the least bit grateful. Day one, they had her sorting files, and she complained to Glenda all night about a college graduate being made to alphabetize. Day two, her team lead handed her a stack of numbers and asked for a simple summary report, and Kendra, who'd never once taken a spreadsheet seriously, stared at it until the numbers swam. She took it home and begged Weston, who'd stopped helping her on principle but caved once, at 11 at night after his own full day. Ramona brought him a glass of water and didn't argue. "Was any of that hard?" she asked. He shook his head. "Then why can't Kendra do it? She's got the same paper." He didn't have an answer because he knew his sister. So Ramona quietly escalated. Through the team lead, she moved Kendra to inventory in the records room. Hot, dusty, exhausting. And Kendra came home wrecked and complaining. And Weston, finally out of patience, told her to review what she was supposed to have learned instead of expecting other people to carry her. Glenda tried to run interference. "She's only been there a little while. If you two can help her, help her. You had proper educations." And that was the line that snapped Ramona's patience clean. "You keep saying Weston can do it because he's educated. Kendra went to the same kind of program. Why can't she?" The room went quiet. Dale slapped the table. Enough. All this noise over one job. Kendra, your work is your work. Figure it out yourself. The next assignment was the real one. Tracking a department's income and expenses, coordinating across teams, real numbers where a mistake mattered. Kendra broke into a cold sweat just looking at it. 3 days she sat frozen, too proud to ask for help, unwilling to admit how little she actually knew, until her team lead lost patience and sent her around to collect the figures in person. And that was how Kendra, wandering the third floor she'd never had reason to visit, stopped dead in a doorway. There was Ramona, behind the desk. The nameplate on the door read Operations Manager. "Why are you working up here?" Kendra blurted. "Why didn't you say anything?" Ramona looked up from her files. The old tone in Kendra's voice landed exactly the way it always did. "This is work hours," she said calmly. "If it's not work-related, later." And she got up and walked past her before Kendra could get another word out. Kendra went home early and told Glenda everything, and Glenda, who might have felt a decent flicker of shame at how she'd talked about a woman running an entire division, instead landed somewhere uglier. "That girl's strange," she muttered. "Sits on a job like that and keeps it hidden. Scared she'd have to help her sister-in-law up, I'd bet." Kendra agreed at once. If Ramona really cared, she'd have found her something better than clerk. The two of them stewed together all afternoon. Ramona had seen it coming before she left the office. When she walked in, Kendra started right up. "Well, if it isn't the manager. Since we're off the clock now, sit down and hear your sister-in-law out. I want you to transfer me somewhere better. I'm done being an ordinary clerk." Ramona put her bag down and sat. "That's funny," she said, and there was a smile in it that didn't reach warm. "Students still in school can do what you've been given. You can't manage that, and you're already asking for something else. Maybe look at yourself before you look at the org chart." Kendra went white. Glenda came out swinging on cue. "I've never seen anything like it. Other families help their own move up and you hold your own sister-in-law down. Or are you scared she'll do better than you?" And that was the point where Ramona was done. "With those marks and that work ethic," she said, "who exactly is she going to do better than?" Glenda's voice climbed. Ramona was too tired to keep listening. She went upstairs and left the two of them shouting at the bottom of the stairwell. That night, she told Weston, plainly, that she was finished making room for Kendra. And Weston, who'd spent a year wedged between his wife and his family, absorbing everyone's grief so nobody had to feel the full weight of it, did something he hadn't done enough of. He stopped splitting the difference. "You're right," he said. "They've gone too far. Handle it however you need to. I've got your back on it, whatever it cost me at the dinner table." It cost him. The next morning, Kendra sailed into work sure her mother had fixed it, took out a compact at her desk, and ignored her team lead entirely, until he told her, flatly, that the assignment stood and that it came from Ramona, and that any questions could go straight to her. Kendra stormed up 3 floors and barged into Ramona's office without knocking. "What are you doing?" "Didn't you hear what Mom said?" Ramona stood. Half the floor was watching. "When you're at work, you work," she said, loud enough and level enough that it carried. "If you can't do the job, write your resignation and go." Kendra froze. People were whispering. Humiliated, she grabbed her bag and walked out of the building without telling a soul she was quitting. She just left. And she went home and told Glenda a version of events in which Ramona was the villain. And Glenda called Ramona to unload, and Ramona didn't pick up, which made it worse. By the time Ramona got home, Glenda was in the front hall with a finger already up. "People can really hide what they are. Is this how you treat your own sister-in-law? What did I do wrong? You've got the nerve to ask? Just because she's your sister-in-law doesn't mean you can do whatever you please to her." Weston and Dale came in together, one from work, one from his walk. Weston took one look at his mother's face and knew, and this time he didn't try to talk everyone down into a mush. He got the whole story. From the start, every task, every complaint, everything Kendra had said, and he told it in front of everyone, and with each sentence Glenda and Kendra went paler. Dale held his head in his hands. "This is mortifying. A spoiled kid is the result of bad parenting, and I've had a hand in it, I'll own that. But you two, how could you even say these things?" He rounded on his wife. "Look at Ramona. Works, keeps this house, and you spend your days sharpening your daughter into someone no one will want to hire. Fix that, not her." For days the house ran cold and polite. Ramona's anger burned off, but the disappointment stayed. She'd tried to help Kendra with good intentions and had it thrown back in her face, and she made herself a quiet promise. Whatever Kendra did to her own life from here on, Ramona was out. If it came apart, that would be Kendra's doing, not hers. She'd have kept that promise too, if it hadn't been for Brody. Kendra had stopped job hunting entirely and taken up with a new crowd, and out of that crowd came Brody, who was chasing her hard. Good-looking in a try-hard way, always dressed like the money was real, hair bleached a brassy yellow, and inside a couple of weeks Kendra was calling him her boyfriend. But like tends to find like. Brody drifted. His family had run out of ways to reach him years ago. He'd never held a job long, never taken anything seriously, and mostly lived off whoever would carry him. The first time Ramona met him it was late, and she was out at the end of the drive waiting for Weston. A motorcycle headlight swung across the snow, and there was Brody dropping Kendra off, and he didn't so much as nod at Ramona, just gave her a slow, mocking once-over before he rode off. It sat wrong with her all night. She'd meant to stay out of Kendra's business. But she had a sister Kendra's age, Wren, back home in Bracebridge, and the thought of a girl that age hitching herself to a man like that stuck in her like a sliver. So she told Weston what she'd seen. Talk to your parents. If she gets in deep with someone like that and it goes bad, she'll pay for it a long time. Weston listened because he always did. Ramona never exaggerated, and when she was worried it meant something. He waited up the next night, saw the motorcycle, saw Brody and understood. When he tried to raise it though, Kendra bit his head off. My life, my business. When did you get as nosy as your wife? And he lost his temper, and to his own shame slapped her. Kendra screamed for their mother, and Glenda came running and, without asking what had happened, took her daughter's side the way she always did. Weston explained about Brody, about what kind of man he seemed to be, about being scared for her. Glenda waved it all off. She's grown. Who she dates is her business. And so Brody kept coming around, and Glenda even had him to supper, and Kendra spent more nights out than in. Then Ramona started noticing things. Kendra looked gray and tired. She was off her food, then eating green apples alone at 10 at night. Ramona had never been pregnant. She and Weston were careful, planning, but a woman on her team had had every one of these signs a few months back and it nagged at her. She and Kendra barely spoke by then, but she went over anyway. Kendra, you've been off lately. You should take a test. Off how? Or is it too quiet around here for you, so now you're inventing things? Ramona kept her voice flat. I'm not inventing anything. I think you might be pregnant. Check. And she left. Kendra muttered after her, then went cold, then did the math on a late period, and went out and bought the test. It was exactly what Ramona had guessed. Strangely, Kendra wasn't scared. Brody was always going on about kids and a family someday. She was sure he'd be thrilled. She called him and told him, and over the phone she couldn't see the panic cross his face, only heard him say the right things. Really, since when? I'll take you to the doctor tomorrow. And she hung up glowing. That afternoon, Glenda went to run a bath and found the test on the counter. Her first thought, of course, was Ramona. Married a while now, surely it was time. And she flew upstairs and knocked, holding it up like a trophy. Ramona, are you? Ramona looked at it and shook her head. That's not mine. The light went out of Glenda's face. Then whose is it? Ramona thought of the 10 o'clock apples and said nothing, only went downstairs and called out, Kendra, come here. One look at the test in her mother's hand and Kendra's face gave her away. Glenda's eyes went huge. Then Dale and Weston came in, read the room, and got the story, and Dale went off like a furnace. Before marriage, how could you? And Kendra dissolved into tears, and Glenda, who had defended this girl into the ground for 2 years, sat down hard and had nothing to say. The only calm person in the room was Ramona, who asked the one question that mattered. Have you told him? He's taking me to the doctor tomorrow, Kendra said. He did not take her to the doctor tomorrow. She got up early and spent an hour on her hair and waited. And he didn't come, and he didn't answer, and by afternoon she was frantic and went out to find him, and Ramona, with a bad feeling she couldn't shake, followed at a distance. Kendra tried his house. His own parents hadn't seen him since the night before and didn't seem surprised. She finally tracked him to a bar downtown, and Ramona hung back by the door while Kendra walked in and found Brody with another girl in his lap, laughing, drinking, entirely at ease. Brody, what are you doing? He looked up and annoyance crossed his face. Why are you here? I've been calling all day. I told you I'm pregnant. He glanced at the people nearby and lowered his voice. So? He leaned back. How do I know it's mine? The words hit her like a slap, and when he shoved her hand off his shirt hard enough to make her stumble, Ramona had seen enough. She stepped between them. Brody recognized her and sneered that it was none of her business, and Ramona said it had become her business the second he got her sister-in-law pregnant and tried to run. He stood. She didn't move. The whole bar had gone quiet and turned to watch, and for the first time Brody looked uncomfortable, with Kendra sobbing behind Ramona and the crowd murmuring and pointing. If you don't think it's yours, Ramona said steady, we do a paternity test when the baby comes, but running won't make it not exist. I don't have time for this. He made to leave. Kendra grabbed him and he flung her off. Get lost. Ramona caught her before she fell and the room hissed. Brody, humiliated and furious, spat that it was his life and none of them had a right to tell him anything. And Ramona let him have it clean. You're right, it's your life. But when what you do lands on other people, you don't get to walk off pretending you're innocent. So answer one thing. Are you taking responsibility for her and the baby or not? He was quiet a long moment. Then, short and flat. No, I never told her to get pregnant. That shattered the last of it. Kendra covered her face. Ramona looked at him with something worse than anger, plain disappointment. One day you'll regret this. He snorted and turned back to his friends, and Ramona took Kendra gently by the arm and said, "Let's go home." Kendra cried the whole way, and Ramona said almost nothing, because she'd learned that what a person needs in that state isn't a lecture. But when they got home and told the family, and Dale clenched his fists, and Glenda stared at the wall, Ramona had already made up her mind about something else. If Brody thought he could just walk, he was going to learn otherwise. She spent the next days asking around quietly, carefully, about exactly who Brody was. What she turned up didn't surprise her. Years of drifting, no steady work, money owed all over and never paid back, a trail of girls before Kendra, more than one of them treated the same way. His own family had spent years cleaning up after him, which was precisely why he'd never once feared a consequence in his life. So Ramona went to see his parents alone. They weren't surprised either. His father sighed that Brody was grown, that they couldn't make him do anything. "I'm not asking you to make him," Ramona said. "I'm asking you to help him face what he's done." His mother looked at the floor. "We've tried for years. He doesn't hear us." She didn't give up. She kept gathering until the picture was complete, and then she went back to the bar with a folder. When Brody opened it and saw the records, the debts, the names, the whole map of himself laid out on paper, the swagger drained out of him. "What is this?" "Information," Ramona said, arms folded. "More than enough of it. You can keep pretending nothing happened. But if you keep running from this, I'll make sure everyone you know sees exactly who you are." She didn't raise her voice once. Two roads. You take responsibility for Kendra and the baby, or this becomes a much bigger problem than you want. His friends looked away, and when his parents arrived, she'd called them and saw the folder. They went pale, because they understood she was serious. His father looked at his son for a long time and finally said, "Enough, you're taking responsibility." For the first time in his life, Brody was cornered, with no one left to bail him out. The families met at Glenda's to talk it through, and it was as grim a gathering as you'd expect. Kendra sat with her head down. Brody sat gloomy, dragged there. When the talk turned to where the young couple would live, Ramona spoke up. "If they're getting married, Brody moves in here." He looked up. "Why would I live here?" "Because Kendra's pregnant and she needs people around her. And after everything, nobody trusts you enough to let her go off with you. If you really mean to take responsibility, that shouldn't be a problem." His parents nodded before he could argue. His father agreed she was right. Brody objected once more, and Dale said evenly, "Then maybe you're not ready to be a husband or a father." And with both families looking at him, Brody had no room left. He agreed. The wedding was nothing like a wedding you dream about. Too much had happened. But both families did their best to make it respectable. And all through it, Kendra kept glancing at Ramona, because she knew perfectly well that without her, Brody would never have shown up at all. For the first time, she felt something toward her sister-in-law that wasn't spite. Even Glenda softened. She'd never say it out loud, but she knew who had protected her daughter when no one else could. Getting Brody to the altar solved one problem, and not the deeper one. He was still lazy, still slippery, agreeing to everything in the moment and doing as he pleased after. But Ramona had done her part. Whether he became a man now was on him. She didn't hound him. She just refused to let him hide. When he skipped Kendra's prenatal appointments, she asked him in front of everyone when he planned to take his wife, and Dale backed her. "She's carrying your child. If you can't manage a doctor's visit, what kind of husband are you?" And Brody, with no answer, finally went. Every time he dodged, Ramona named it, plainly, where people could hear. He hated it at first. But slowly something turned. He was home more. He argued less. He picked up shifts. Small things, but real. Kendra saw them and started, cautiously, to hope again, and Glenda, watching all of it, came to understand more than once that if Ramona hadn't stepped in, both her daughter and the baby would have been left with nothing. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday, Ramona learned the last secret the house was keeping. She'd gone early to a cafe off Lock Street to meet a supplier before a meeting, and there, at a corner table, was Dale. Dale, who never went for coffee, sitting across from a young woman about Kendra's age, close and laughing. Ramona sat down quietly a few tables back where he couldn't see her, and listened and understood in about 90 seconds that this was not a niece. It floored her. Dale had always been the steady one, the fair one, the one who defended her when no one else would. The girl had the practiced, sweet manner of someone who kept an older man's company for what fell out of his wallet. She thought about it for a long time. If she made a scene, Dale would be humiliated, and things between them would never be right again. If she stayed silent, she was as good as blessing it, and the person who'd bleed for it in the end was Glenda. So she stood, walked over, and the moment Dale saw her, his face went bloodless. Ramona put a bright, warm hand on his and said, in the sweetest voice, "Honey, weren't you taking me to get my new phone this morning? Why are you sitting here, and who's this?" She was squeezing his hand hard enough to make him wince. The young woman's eyes went wide and she started to snap, and Ramona leaned in close to her ear. "If you'd like the whole cafe to know you're seeing a man old enough to be your father for the money, keep talking." The girl's fight evaporated. Ramona smiled and kept going, quiet and pleasant. "I'm the same as you, sweetheart," following him around hoping for a little cash. "You're a bit green, aren't you? A man who'll bankroll you will bankroll plenty of others." The girl went scarlet, stood and stormed off. "You're a liar," flung back at Dale on her way out. Only then did Ramona let go of his hand and sit. "Dale," she said gently, "aren't you afraid Glenda finds out?" He couldn't look at her. All he could do was ask her to keep it quiet. That nothing had happened, that he'd known the girl a few days, that he'd only been looking for a bit of excitement. And when Ramona asked him, plainly, why a man his age was out chasing that, he finally said the thing he'd carried for years, that in 3 decades Glenda had never once made him a proper meal, never spoken to him softly, never taken care of herself. And he'd gotten tired and gone looking for warmth in the wrong place, though he swore he'd never leave her, never break up the family. It sat heavy on Ramona. She didn't know the right answer. For the moment she promised to keep it, on the condition that he end every outside thing completely, sit with what he'd done, and turn back toward home. And then she went to work on the harder repair, the one underneath. She stopped staying late so often. She started coming home early and coaxing Glenda, who could not cook to save her life and knew it, into a weekly cooking class down at the community center. Glenda refused at first. Ramona kept at her until she caved, and at the class Glenda fell in with a table of women her own age, and between the recipes and the gossip and the company, something in her uncoiled. Her cooking got better fast. One evening a whole spread of good food came out for supper, and Dale, astonished, asked when on earth Ramona had had the time. "Mom made it," Ramona said. "Try it." Dale took a bite and could not believe his wife had made it, and he heaped on praise, and Glenda glowed under it like a girl. Late that night there was a knock at Glenda's door, and when she opened it and saw Ramona, she smiled. A real one. The prejudice had bled out of her by then, replaced by something almost motherly. Ramona held out a bag, soft new clothes, good skin cream. "Got paid," she said. "Bought you a few things." Glenda saw at once they weren't cheap, and her eyes filled. "Why would you? This is too much." Ramona took her hand. "Don't fuss about money so much, Mom. A woman should look after herself at any age. Take them, make me happy. I'm going to swap out those old clothes of yours one bag at a time." Tears spilled over, because Glenda's own daughter had never once bought her anything like it, and because Ramona had given her things before, back when Glenda was too full of prejudice to see them. From then Glenda changed for good. She looked younger, brighter, went out with her new friends, laughed more. She was even gentler with Dale. And Dale, who knew every bit of that softness traced back to Ramona, and who remembered her keeping his worst mistake, felt a gratitude toward his daughter-in-law that ran deep and quiet. With his home warm and his wife happy and looking after herself, the cheap thrill he'd chased lost every ounce of its pull. He stopped thinking about it entirely. Kendra had her baby, a girl, and everyone learned fast how hard a newborn is, and Ramona kept a closer eye on Brody through it, kept nudging him toward his wife and daughter. Whether it was her steady pressure or just the weight of becoming a father, he came around more than anyone expected. Softer with Kendra, careful with his words. Once the baby was bigger, Weston and Ramona helped the young couple with a bit of startup money to open a small variety store 2 streets over. And finally they had steady work and steady income, and finally Dale and Glenda could set down the worry they'd carried for 2 years. Then one evening at supper Ramona, of all things, went green at the smell of the sour trout soup she usually loved. Weston and Dale looked baffled. Kendra and Glenda started to grin, and Glenda said, delighted, "Looks like your father and I are getting another grandbaby." Weston lit up and swept Ramona right off her feet, and Glenda shrieked at him to put her down before he hurt her grandchild. From that day Glenda took over the house herself and wouldn't let Ramona lift a thing. Kendra came by to help her mother, and every morning Glenda went down to the market for whatever was best for a pregnant woman, until the stall holders started teasing that you'd think it was her own daughter carrying. She only smiled at that. She knew how she'd treated the girl once, and she understood why the change surprised people. The afternoon the labor came, Ramona was home with only Glenda, and Weston still at work, and Glenda, pale with nerves, called a cab and paced and ran back inside twice for the hospital bag, and reassured Ramona in a voice that shook. At the hospital, with Ramona bent over in pain, Glenda shouted down the corridor, "Doctor, hurry, my daughter's about to deliver, she's in too much pain." And Ramona, even through the contractions, heard the words clear as anything, "My daughter." The very same way Glenda had carried on when Kendra gave birth, and something in her chest eased so much that the pain seemed, for a moment, easier to bear. Her eyes stung because she knew now it was real. She had a healthy boy. Glenda held him and couldn't stop smiling, carried him up and down the ward, telling every stranger her daughter had just given her a fat little grandson. And Weston laughed and teased her. Funny, wasn't there someone who fought this marriage tooth and nail? Glenda flushed and swatted at him. People make mistakes. I was wrong. But you weren't wrong about her. Then she sat down beside Ramona and took her hand. Thank you for not turning your back on me. I did a lot wrong. Let me spend the rest of it making up for it, all right? Ramona had never gone looking for revenge, not really. She'd stood up when standing up was called for, and drawn a line when a line was needed, and refused every time to be made small in her own home. But she'd chosen understanding over grudges and kindness over cruelty at every turn, and one by one the people who'd wanted her gone had come to see what she was, and to see something better in themselves along the way. She hadn't schemed her way into that family's heart. She'd earned it, the slow way, and in the end, she'd gotten far more than a place at the table. She'd gotten the love and the gratitude, and the respect of the very people who'd once stood at the door and tried to keep her out.